Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 58 of the 11FS Insider Breakfast Show. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, here live on LinkedIn. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by my boss, which is all a bit weird, I'm not going to lie, but 11FS Chairman Shaun Meadows. On this morning's show, what we're going to be doing is talking about Shaun's journey to 11FS, the importance of company culture, particularly in this period, and what fintech innovation and digital transformation really means. So good morning, Shaun. How are you doing?
Good morning, David. Yep, it does feel a bit weird to actually be doing this on a broadcast rather than just a normal daily sort of catch up and find out what's going on. So I'm doing really good, thank you.
Good. As always, everybody over on LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining us. I see there's lots of people joining us from all over the planet again, which is good fun. So if you've got any questions for Shaun, or if you've got any questions for me, drop them into the comments as we go along, and we'll just weave them into the conversation as we go. Shaun, what would be really good to do for everybody's benefit actually is if you could start by, telling us a little bit about what you do at 11FS. And then actually some of your background as well, because I think that really weaves into the story.
Yeah, so at 11FS, I have the honour really of being the chairman of the board, and I know you called me your boss, but I think we have a sort of mutual partnership in terms of what we're trying to achieve for the business. What does my day-to-day stuff feel like? Well, I don't do any executive stuff, so I do lots of coaching with the executive team there. I'm sitting listening to them probably once a week, spend time with you, spend time with sort of the leadership team, and also keep the investors and shareholders happy about what's going on and keeping them informed and just listening to what they're doing.
And in terms of your background, do you want to give people a bit of an overview about, where you've been? Because I've known you for 15 years, I guess, at this stage, which makes me feel a lot older than I did when I got up this morning, I have to say.
For the majority of my career, I had the great honor of actually working at Aviva. I loved it. I loved being part of that big corporate machine. I was on their executive team in various forms for about 10 years, different roles. I was a marketing director here in the UK, the pleasure of being their CEO out in Singapore and Hong Kong, ran some big change programs, and just had a great time. It was a great place to experience how to work in a big business. Since then, for the last 8 years, I've been doing this type of work, where either advisory board work, NED work, really around companies and their growth and their culture and how they transform and scale. So having a great time.
And I often say to people, I remember very vividly when I was at Aviva and you were at Aviva, and you were roughly a million levels above me at Aviva. And actually, I remember coming and presenting at your board with some of the things that I was doing and trying to kind of get going actually in the digital agenda at Aviva at the time. And what struck me even in your board was culture. It doesn't require people to be conflicting or to be shouting to be heard. And I think that's something that, if I'm honest with you, even though we didn't get to talk about it at the time, I know we got to talk about it a lot later, has always stuck with me. So I think it's a real fallacy that you have to be at the top, you have to be a bad guy. And I think you set a tone for me in those meetings, actually, that actually you can be a good person and a good cultural ambassador for an organization and really drive performance and drive things forward. So, I've said thank you a lot of times before. Seems weird saying thank you in front of all of these people, but I think culture is something that I think I got a lot from you. So, how did you go about doing that? Because that's obviously in a big corporate environment, then, does the tone get set from the top?
Yeah, I do. And I've always thought that the way you behave as an individual and the way your team behaves is the most critical part to getting performance. I've never been one of those real command and control sort of shouting leaders. That was not really in my DNA. So I don't think I could ever be that person. I can be tough, and I think sometimes being that sort of relationship, getting teams behind a sort of vision is really, really important to sort of creating the right culture. And actually then if you then on that odd occasion you flip into sort of a slightly disappointed, I don't really like what you're doing on that, has more impact to me at that point, because actually people don't ever see that side of you. But I do think, as you say, I think I've always been that type of person, and I still fundamentally believe, and I was lucky enough to have a coach called Claire Breeze for probably about 10 years of my Aviva career. And I think what she taught me was that it was really important to be authentic, be the person that you are, and then the culture drives off that. Because the minute you start to be somebody that you're almost acting on a daily basis, people pick that up, and they get to realize that actually this isn't the real Shaun, or this isn't the real David. And I guess also that consistency of approach for who you are and that authenticity really helps you. And again, that just flows through the organization. And so I guess my final point on it would be that, as long as you then are consistent with that, which is what we're trying to do, and delivering through 11FS, which is every single thing we do is around our values and our culture, and all of your decisions are made based on that. It just becomes the way you are, and people know you for that throughout the organization, and actually much wider. And it's interesting, to your point, there's a lot of people I met during my Aviva times who are now really good friends. And the other thing I would say, which is, you mentioned how the hell did we come back together again, is, if you like that, people stay in touch with you. They want to stay connected to you, and they want you, and you want to help them in their journey. So yeah, to me, it's all of those things, multi-layered.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. It's interesting times as well, isn't it? I mean, and obviously, I think for many organizations, sticking to that during this period of time is interesting, isn't it? Because I think you can see many organizations have as you said, like a value system, but the value system has to be the same when it's, the sun is shining and everything is well, as opposed to when, we're in a global pandemic, right? They either are your values or they aren't your values, right? So it's interesting that actually, I think you see some people changing tact quite dramatically during this period, because maybe the values don't fit to the environment that they need. So, I mean, it's an interesting one to see. I mean, obviously everything that's happening with coronavirus is having an impact more broadly. But I mean, how have you found this transition to being at home all the time? I notice. I mean, you've managed to get your builders to stop drilling for at least half an hour, haven't you? Which is at least a sign of progress. But working from home is pretty hard, isn't it?
It is really hard. I'm really lucky to have a lovely wife who works all day at home as well, and we have our new routines. When we worked in offices, we had our routines of, when you went off to work, getting the tube, getting the train. And we've just developed a new routine, which is, I think, the best way for me to cope with that, which is I need to know what my routine of my day is. But yeah, it's bloody hard. I can't say I switched from whizzing around London and the Southeast and that sort of stuff to suddenly sitting in the same place all day simply. And it's really taken me a little while to develop what's my new rhythm of my day. How does that work? How does that rhythm affect the way that previously, as I'm sure a lot of us used to do, have those drop-in conversations with people, those check-ins, and just those little, oh, can we just have a quick cup of coffee about something? You have to be so much more thoughtful about how do you do that in this way of everything being on a screen or a call, because you can't actually just pop and see somebody. So to me, it's more important. And my worry is actually, if I'm honest, with some businesses that their values aren't translating because actually they didn't really think through, they didn't really understand, they didn't act them in their office. Whereas, I do have quite a lot of confidence that the way we work in 11FS is that they're just so transferable. We already were working remotely quite frequently. Most of our systems and processes allowed for us to work remotely. So suddenly you've got that. It's not a big change, but I do think, and I know you and I talk about it a lot, and with your leadership team, that you have to be really conscious of culturally, what are you having to do differently from the way you do your town halls, the way you do to drop-ins with people, the way you sort of have coffees with people. But you still have to keep doing those things, and but you have to force yourself to do them a bit more, because they're not just at the coffee machine or they're just not at the fridge. You've got to make those things happen now. But yeah, can't say it's easy. I would be really interested for someone going, yeah, I'm finding this so easy that it's actually, the new way completely.
Yeah. I mean, it is, like I say, it's interesting times for those things, isn't it? Sort of scaling a business, keeping the culture, developing through those things. It is a real challenge. There's an interesting question over on LinkedIn actually. So from Dan, he says, as two people from Aviva, why do we think insurance appears to be lagging behind banking with respect to digital transformation? Because obviously there's been such an explosion with fintech and banking. I think there has been now with insurtech and insurance, but I'd say definitely there's a lag there in terms of the progression between. If you look at banking, the transition that's happening in banking is from buying banking products to owning a banking product. In terms of, it's more about, if you look at what the challenger banks are doing, it's more about they're getting it quickly, 2, 3, 4 minute account opening process being hygiene factors. And it's more about the service that you get on a day-to-day basis. I don't think insurance has gone through enough of a refocus yet in terms of really the things that are important for it. It's still very much in the, it's about a quote, it's about the application process and the speed around those things. But arguably the insurance industry has gone through more of an impact really with aggregators and affiliates and everything that went there. So the sort of disintermediation that people were scared of in banking happened in insurance already. But what do you think, Shaun? Do you think insurance is kind of lacking behind banking a little bit, or do you think they're both sort of doing it in their own way?
I personally think it is lagging behind. I do think it doesn't have the scale of change that has happened in banking. Do I think it will happen? Yeah, I do think it will happen. I think there are some really good insurtech businesses coming up, but for very tiny parts of the process. I don't know, when I normally talk about this, what I still haven't seen is someone who's, as you say, someone who's transformed the complete insurance quote by service type model. They haven't done that. There's people who've sort of put a small piece in the claims process or a small piece in the buying process, but nobody's fundamentally sort of tackled the, why do we do this? Why do I think that is? Quite frequently it's an annual purchase, isn't it? So it's not so in your face as a need to change. I think there's been some change and some digitalization of processes which make it a bit easier. I think some companies, actually Aviva, have done some really interesting things about getting your quote much quicker by using data in a different way, which is really interesting. But in the main, I think it's one of the things we talk about. People have digitalized the process rather than thinking about how do they make a digital product. And I think that will be the big change for insurance, when someone actually starts with, what is it the customer wants here? What's the customer need? And how do we service it? Rather than thinking, right, here's a motor policy or here's a home insurance policy. And that's the change, and I don't think we've seen yet in insurance. And I'm pretty sure it will come. I'm sure there's somebody out there that is already thinking about that. But I think that's why it hasn't changed quite as dramatically.
And as you say, the model from an insurance perspective, the capital requirements to launch an insurance, top to bottom, insurance isn't just insurance, it's the reinsurance and all the poles at the bottom there as well. So the whole system has to change very dramatically, doesn't it, to really being in a situation where you can influence the atoms that are the products that kind of fly around in that system. But it is an interesting one. Another interesting question for you, actually, that was over on LinkedIn by Bhavin Shaw. It says, Shaun, how do you go about coaching multi-generational talent? So obviously you have you work with different types of organization. You don't just work with 11FS now, you work with different people. You've got different young millennial rapscallions like myself, and you've got different people that you kind of deal with. How does that work for you in terms of coaching different types of people?
Well, that's an amazingly bloody interesting question. I never think about it, though, if I'm absolutely honest. I don't ever consider the age or gender or whatever of the person that I'm sitting in front of talking to. I'm now questioning whether I should in my head, but I haven't ever done that. I think probably because actually the fundamentals of understanding somebody, what drives them, what are their foibles, what are the things that, get them out of bed in the morning, what are the things that cause them challenges in their day-to-day work, are the same, whether you're, just starting off in your career or whether you're just finishing your career. I think my view would be that, getting under the skin of that person, understanding what they want to achieve, and really getting them to sort of feel that inside themselves and allow that to flourish doesn't really change whatever generation that you actually are.
I think, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think like anybody who's trying to help people predominantly with, strategy and behavior, it's, I guess it's probably being in a situation where those people are open to changing what they're doing. Because I think if people won't let you help, it's impossible to help them, isn't it? So there must be some common elements to it. But like I say, I'd say, given how you are and given how we are, it's very much a relationship based approach, which is, I really respect your opinion. I really respect the things you've done in the past. So when you tell me something, I know it's coming from we always talk about positive intent. There's always positive intent in terms of the thing that we're trying to do. And there's a common view of what we're trying to achieve. And I think probably if you have those two things, it must make life a lot easier. If you don't have those two things, then you're asking people to do things that they almost don't understand, which would be difficult. But some other really interesting comment. I mean, this is turning into an AMA now. Given Shaun, we're going to have to get you back, I think, to cover all of these. But Steve Brown, question over there. What challenges have you faced with maintaining and sustaining culture in 11FS? What tips would you provide to fast growth environments? Adding people at pace is a bit of a challenge. I mean, Steve, we actually have done a lot of work about our values. And actually, if you don't do that, you're not giving people a framework of, as Shaun said, really what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And it's interesting because if you don't have a model, you don't have that framework that people can use as a framework for discussions with people, it makes it really difficult to say whether something is working or somebody is working, or on the perverse, the opposite of that, whether they're not working and therefore what you can do about it. So defining those values. I think the other thing that I'd say is the rituals of the organization have to be constantly being looked at. As Shaun said, particularly in this period with everything that's happening with COVID, then what do team meetings look like? What do town halls do? How are you communicating? How frequently are you communicating? I mean, all of those things, Shaun. I mean, we've made lots of changes at 11FS during this period. My own team have gone from meeting every other week for 3 hours to meeting every morning for half an hour. So there's lots of things that you can do to evolve. But if you don't set those frameworks for me, you're not giving people the setup to understand what they should and shouldn't do, essentially.
Yeah, and my build on that, I love rituals and rhythms, and I probably use those words too frequently, I think. So I think that's, to me, a really important thing, that you just stick to your rituals. And the bigger you get, and the bigger your scale, actually they become more important rather than less important. And I think I tell you a tale of, there's a lovely business I work with called Market Gravity, who always did a show and tell on a Friday, whether there was 4 or 5 people, which is when I started working with them, or when at the end there were 70 people. They still did their beer show and tell on a Friday. And I think you just have to keep going and doing those things without almost without even thinking about why we're doing it. It's part of who we are and our rituals and the way that we work. I think it's, to me, the build I'd make on your point is, but often it starts also with recruitment. This doesn't start when somebody is in the office. It starts, if you need 40 new people, you need to make sure those 40 new people, when your whole recruitment process is built around your values, so you understand not technically whether they can do some accounting or whether they're an engineer, but how will they fit? How will they actually absorb the values of the organization? And equally, you get it wrong. There will be people that you bring in that don't quite fit, who've gone through all that process, or something happens to them that they don't really want to be there anymore. No, it's really cruel, but you have to deal with that pretty quickly as well, because that can equally ripple and cause bigger issues if you just let that carry on in the organisation. But it's, and I go back, it's bloody hard, and I think it would be fair to say, David, that it's a topic of constant conversation, because you have to keep changing and evolving as well. To your point about the meetings, we've changed the way we communicate to the wider team. You just have to keep refreshing that, because that's what people expect, different things against the same agenda, really.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think that's the main point to sort of answer the question, Steve. It's not something you set and forget. It's something that actually, if you really care about your culture, it's something that you're spending a really decent proportion of your time and effort doing and shaping and evolving kind of every day, really. So an interesting question for you, Shaun, by Simon Schofield, actually. So looking back at your time with 11FS, has it developed as you envisaged? Has anything surprised you during your period of time with us, Shaun?
Has it developed as I envisaged? Well, I think we're on track with the strategy and plan that you talked to me about what you were trying to achieve, which I think we then built into a really good vision of the organization and what we needed to do organizationally and product-wise, etc., to make happen. So the only blip in that, I would say, is that we've had this wonderful pandemic, which has just meant, and as we was talking earlier about, the economy has slightly dived off a cliff. Just meant, I think, that some of that will be delayed for a short period of time. Yeah. I think that the conversations we had around, organizationally and developing how we work as a team, how we sort of all get together against that vision, and how do we take people with us, absolutely on track with that. I think in terms of proposition and how we're widening that globally, I think we're on track with that. So yeah, I think the one big sort of smack with a baseball bat we've had is the economy, really, which everybody, I think, that I speak to is in pretty much the same place.
Yeah, it's pretty scary times, I have to say. I mean, we looked at we were talking before this, but the economy in April dropping by 20.4%. That's an all-time record. It's a pretty scary time, I have to say. There's an interesting comment here from Deval Gore. So, morning both. I like the rituals and building a rhythm in your business. What kind of discussions are you having internally in relation to Black Lives Matter and wider issues on diversity? I mean, Deval, as you know from conversations that I've had with you, it's a topic that I'm giving a lot of thought in terms of actually what do we need to do to address it, and actually what do we need to do to help. Because I think there's two things for us, really, from our perspective at 11FS. There's what do we need to do to ensure that the environment that we have is a open and inclusive one for everybody of all backgrounds. I think the other thing on that we're looking at as well is what is it that we can do with the skill sets that we have, with the platforms that we have, to try and address some of that imbalance that actually there is in society. So we're having lots of conversations internally to look at what it is that we can do. And actually, I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll be ready to start talking a little bit more about that and what is it that we feel we can do to really start addressing that difference publicly. Because it's obviously one that affects everybody. I think I've always said publicly that I kind of want 11FS to try and reflect the world in which we all live in. But unfortunately, I think the reality of that situation now, when you look at everything that is happening in the world, is I think it actually has to be different to that. It has to be more in order to try and address those imbalances. So we'll be coming back with what we feel we can do on that very, very shortly. So, I mean, it's coming to the top of the hour, unfortunately, Shaun. There's been an absolute deluge of questions that we could probably spend a few more hours on in terms of talking through. But at this stage, I think we probably should let everybody go and get on with their days anyway. But Shaun, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and all the good stuff that you're getting up to?
So yeah, I have a Twitter handle at Shaun Meadows 1. I'm on LinkedIn, so please feel free just to drop me a message. I'm on there as Shaun Meadows, chairman of 11FS, so pretty easy to find.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have for you this week, but we'll be back with another stellar lineup next week. On Monday, we've got Bailey Kassar, who is the co-founder and CEO over at Tuco. Bailey has been involved in some pretty amazing businesses all the way through, and the aspiration with what she wants to do with Tuco is looking really, really good. On Tuesday, we've got a friend of mine, Peter Barron, who is the CEO over at TBI Bank. They're doing actually some really amazing things. A real story that needs to be have a light shined on it, I think, in terms of the amount of change that's happened at that organization and the performance of that company as well. Wednesday, we've got Lara Gilman, who is the co-lead at iWalker Pay. Again, those guys have been on an absolute tear lately, so going to be really interesting to see what she's got to say. Thursday, we've got Mike Cunningham, who is the Chief Strategy and Digital Officer at Banque Saudi Fransi, BSF, as I know them. Mike's been, I mean, a real leader in the Middle East Africa region for a real long period of time. And that region for me is changing so dramatically in terms of the adoption of digital. So Mike will come in and give us some great insights on that, I'm sure. And on Friday, we've got Simon Torrance, who is a really amazing author. He's written some great books. So New Growth Playbook, Fight Back, and amongst many others. Simon's going to be coming in and giving us a bit of a view of what he's been looking at and also what organizations can do in this period to fight back. It's going to be a great week, I think. Make sure you don't miss any of those episodes. We'll see you guys at the same time, same place next week. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe. See you later.